Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Annie, this is Stanley, and we're here to talk about books. Today's video is going to be about all the books that I finished in May, which turned out to be a lot more than I was expecting. So I'm aware that my very first wrap-up video of all the books that I finished in April is probably a bit longer than most BookTube videos want to be, but I don't know. All I want to do is read at the moment. I was going to restrict myself to the number of books that I would get through in May. And then I thought trying to read less is probably just as ridiculous as trying to read more. So I think I'm going to try and take a different approach, which is to say maybe a little bit less about each of the books. But then I'm probably going to end up just being like Elizabeth from Plant-Based Bride, who always says that she's going to try and say less and then uploads 2-hour-long videos. But then I love her 2-hour-long videos. I think she's amazing. And she just hit 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. So I can only dream to aspire to such greatness. So we're going to see how it goes and just wing it, I think. But before we get to the books, let's make some tea. So, what do the tea dice have in store for me today? 8 and 8 is 16, so we've got 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Where are we? Green, pear and jasmine. Oh, that's always a good choice. It's going to be a good test of this little teapot as well, because I realised that the spout is narrow enough that I may not need an infuser tray because I don't have one that fits this teapot. But with the green tea leaves, it's possible that they might come out because they're fine enough. So we'll give it a try, see what happens. Good old past me has, as ever, already boiled the kettle. We've got green, pear and jasmine. Very aromatic. Lovely. So now that we've got our tea, which I think is always an important accompaniment to reading, we will go through all of the books that I have finished so far in May. And yeah, the issue is that it's only been 10 days of the month and I've already got through 6 books. So yeah, we're already going to be massively over double figures, and I'm probably going to have to pick some more to add to my TBR because I'm running a bit low. So the first book that I read in May was Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. And this was my dad's pick for our upcoming family book club meeting. And family book club is my parents, my brother, my husband Dave and me, and we get together 5 times during the year, so everybody gets a turn to pick a book once per year. And this was my dad's pick. And well, I really wanted to like this. I really tried. I went in with an open mind, committed to finishing it because I have a bad reputation in family book club of not necessarily always finishing the books, I have to admit. I was determined to be able to say nice things about it. And on paper, oh, see what I did there? So on metaphorical paper, it seemed like it will be exactly the kind of book for me. It's family saga, historical, lots of drama, interrelationships, all kinds of stuff which I generally tend to like. But on actual paper, didn't really work so well for me. I actually started out partway through making a note of all of the times that I wanted to DNF it, just to kind of get myself through. And I ended up writing down 14 different page numbers on which I really wanted to give up on this book. That said, after page about 150, I also started writing down the page numbers when it really engaged me and made me feel something other than annoyance. And that ended up being 16 page numbers. So the positives did outweigh the negatives. But if it hadn't been for book club and actually, committing to getting through it, I never would have got that far. Anyway, it's about a family of sisters, one of whom marries a young man called William. And then there's lots of drama when various things go awry with the interrelationships between them, and people fall out, and then things come together at the end. It did pick up in the second half, I have to admit, but the first half was very slow, and it kept jumping back over the same period of time from different people's points of view, and it just felt like it really wasn't getting anywhere. And then in the second half, suddenly we got 20 plus years in 100 pages, when the first 100 pages had only covered about 6 months. So once it got to bits that I was really interested in, it just felt like it was skimming past them really fast. And I really wanted more about some of the characters that weren't in it so much. So, it did get better. I'm glad I finished it. I'll be interested to see what happens in the book club discussion, and I may do a little update on what everybody else thought about it. I know Dave liked it more than I did, so that was a bit of a surprise. But yes, Hello Beautiful and Napolitano, I think I'm going to have to go 2.5 stars, because even though the positives outweigh the negatives in terms of the page numbers, overall, still more negative than positive, I think. Sorry, Dad. So next up is The Godmothers by Monica McInerney, and this I picked for the May Magical Readathon map prompt of a book which had a protagonist who was a dancer or involved dancing in the plot. And I picked this because I thought those ladies on the front were wearing ballet shoes, but it turns out that that's not the case. There's no dancing in this book, so that kind of failed. But having said that, I quite enjoyed this overall. It wasn't maybe exactly what I was expecting it to be. It's about a young woman who loses her mother at the age of 17 and then leads quite a lonely and quite rigid existence until she's 30, at which point she loses both her job and her flat. And so she decides to take a big trip across the world from Australia, where she lives, to Scotland to visit her godmothers, hence the title, and finally find out everything that they know about her mother's youth and her father and who her father might be. So again, it sounded like it was going to be very much my kind of book. And overall, I would say I did enjoy it, but it was a lot more, serious, I guess. Tonally, it was a little bit inconsistent. Some of the sections were quite quirky, quite amusing, quite light. And some of the characters were a little bit caricaturish and over the top. And then other times it dealt with some very dark themes of suicide, potential parental neglect, alcoholism. There's also dementia in here, which comes up quite a lot in these kinds of books. So it was kind of a bit all over the place. I enjoyed the romance subplot, was good. Some of the reveals were good, others not so much. So yeah, I think overall I would give it 3.5 stars. So after that, I had to find another book that fulfilled the prompt for dancing. So I picked Shiva's Fire by Suzanne Fisher Staples, which does have a dancer protagonist. So definitely I knew was going to fulfill the prompt. And this is about a young girl called Parvati who grows up in India. The whole book is set in India. And she has a talent for dancing and is recruited by a famous spiritual dance teacher and goes to his dance academy to learn how to do a specific kind of ritual dance. And from the back, and again, the colour palette and the picture on the front, I thought this was going to be a YA paranormal romance, kind of bit fluffy, interesting ride, lots of, teenage melodrama. And it did eventually, well, no, it didn't really turn into that at all. But in the first 50 pages, which takes place in only the first 6 months of her life, so she's a baby, there was a massive environmental disaster and many people died in a flood. her father was trampled to death by elephants, and then there was a disease in the refugee camp which killed off quite a lot more people, and then tigers started coming out of the forest and stealing children from the camp and eating them. So that was a lot. And it was very grim. I kind of felt like Theoden in Helm's Deep in the second Lord of the Rings film. So much death. And that was only the first 6 weeks of her life. But then once the first third of the book was passed and she was a teenager and she got recruited for the dance academy, it did shift more to what I was expecting, tonally massively different. And it was much lighter in the second half. But the romance aspect was barely in it. She didn't even meet the guy properly until maybe 50 pages before the end. And then the ending was quite nebulous. I mean, I don't necessarily mind a nebulous ending, but yeah, it was a bit weird. It was very short. It probably could have been longer. So I don't know. I think 3 stars for this one. But it fulfilled my dancing prompt, so that was kind of handy. And after that, I finished an audiobook called The Rise of Magics by Nora Roberts. And this fulfilled the Reddit Fantasy Bingo Challenge square of the last in a series. So I listened to the first 2 books in that series towards the end of last year, and then finally got round to the final installment this past week. It was good. In terms of the plot, there's a magical plague which kills off quite a lot of the population of the world, but it also gives certain people magical powers as a result of them getting the plague. And there are also people who don't get magical powers who are immune. So there are both mundane and magical people left in the world. And there's a lot of conflict because some of the people without the powers take against the magical people and want to eradicate them. And there are also certain people who get the powers who, either because of the kind of people they were before or because of the influence of the magical power, turn out evil and also want to eradicate the not so evil magical people. And we follow Fallon Swift, who is a young woman who is prophesied to be the One, and the series is called The Chronicles of the One, and she is prophesied to bring balance back to the world. So this was the 3rd installment. We've had a lot of setup, obviously, a lot of really interesting exploration of putting the world back together after a terrible disaster, people getting to grips with having magical powers, rebuilding society, which I really enjoy. And I love all the characters. The world building is really good. In this one, it focused a bit more on Fallon herself, and she's actually my least favourite character in the series. I mean, I don't dislike her, but I like the other characters more. So I wasn't so enthused about that. And also the romance aspect, I just had absolutely no interest at all about the romance between her and her partner who she ends up with. But yeah, it was a good conclusion to the series. There was perhaps a little bit more action than I prefer, a bit too many battles. There was a pretty heavy body count, but then that was what you would expect from a book of this type and this kind of story, and it certainly didn't shy away from the consequences and horrors of war. Perhaps the most interesting aspect was the exploration of how to remain the good guys in a war. So that was pretty good. I liked where it ended up. The conclusion was good. And I liked the epilogue saying what happened to most of the people. So I would give this one 3.5 stars. So after that, I went to possibly my most anticipated book that I picked up recently, which is The Keeper of Lost Things by Ruth Hogan, which was a pick for my TBR jar prompt of romance. And it does fulfill it. I mean, it's my prompt, so I can do what I want, really. But it does have romance, but it's not the main focus of the book. In this book, there is a young woman who inherits a house from her employer, and he's been collecting lost things that he's found lying around, and he's catalogued them in kind of almost a museum in his study in his house. And in his letter that goes along with his will, he charges her with the responsibility of trying to get them back to their owners, which I thought sounded like it was going to be massively my kind of book. And again, this one didn't turn out how I expected at all. The major problem that I had is that, I mean, I'm a fantasy and sci-fi reader. I don't have any problem with books having fantastical elements in them. But in a book which I'm expecting to be completely mundane, completely real world drama story, to suddenly have supernatural elements introduced like over a third of the way through, just I find really off-putting, especially when characters who are meant to be completely mundane, real-world people don't react to supernatural things the way that you would expect, with kind of panic or fear or disbelief or whatever. So it just, I don't know, it just made me not like it so much. It was also a lot more sad than I was expecting. There were some good aspects. I loved the found family aspects. I loved the secondary narrative that was set in the 1970s and all the way through to the present day. That was really good. There were probably 3 different resolutions in the book, and I loved one of them, disliked one of them, and one of them was kind of fine. But overall, just didn't really do it for me, which is a shame because I really loved the other book of Ruth Hogan's that I read a few years ago. So I had high hopes for this one. I'm going to give this one 2.5 stars, sadly. And the last book for this update is The Blue Afternoon by William Boyd, which was my TBR jar prompt of an author surname A to F. So I picked William Boyd. This has been on my shelf for ages. I've bit hit and miss with William Boyd in the past. I've had 2 gems and 1 dud. Unfortunately, this one was a dud. In terms of the plot, it follows Kay Fisher, who is a divorced female architect, and it's set in 1936. So that's quite unusual on both counts. And she's dealing with problems with her dodgy business partner and also demands from her ex-husband. And an old man turns up in her life and claims to be her father and wants her to accompany him on a trip to Portugal to find a woman that he hasn't seen in 30 years. So it had a quite intriguing start, but then it kind of went downhill because once she agreed to talk to the guy about what was going on, he kept saying, there are so many things we need to talk about. And then when she finally got together with him and started asking him questions, he just refused to tell her anything. And it just dragged it out for no apparent reason that was just really annoying. And then finally, after about 75 pages, we took the story took a trip back to 1902, I think, in Manila, where this guy was working to give the whole background of the story. And by the time we got there, I just realised I didn't care, so I decided to put it down, unfortunately. And then I did something which I criticised my husband Dave for all the time, and I looked up the rest of the plot on Wikipedia, and I was really glad that I decided to DNF this book. Definitely dodged a bullet there. I know William Boyd is very popular, very esteemed writer, and as I said, I've loved a couple of the books of his that I've read. Got one more on the shelf, so that will turn up at some point. But yeah, DNF for this one, unfortunately. Well, turns out I think I'm going to run out of books in May, so I'm going to have to pick a few more. So I've got Stanley here with the TBR jar and the spreadsheet of all my TBR data. And of course, here are the book flaps. And we're going to pick another couple of prompts. So let's see. Oh, I can get his head off with one hand. So what does it say? A to F author surname. So we had that before and a bit of a fail on that one. So we're going to have another go. A to F. Oh, yes, I know what I want to read. The book flaps are a little bit precarious, shall we say, at the moment, a bit over full. So this could be a bit dangerous. Mind out, Stanley, you might get a book catapulted. There you go. Yeah, thought that might happen. So we have one I picked up from the Free Station Book Exchange. Yeah, there they go. Yeah, got the robot as well. Robot down. So this is one that I have heard of. I was quite pleased when I saw it. P.S. I Love You by Cecilia Ahern. Definitely A to F. So that's one. Oh, this is a disaster. Okay, I'm just going to put those to one side for now. Pick up the robot, put those back in, give them a good shuffle. What else have we got? So, oh, shortest title. Shortest title. There we go. So, let's see. On the spreadsheet, title, length. There are apparently titles with only one word. Is it going to be one book or is there going to be a choice? Oh, there's 4. So we've got another Cecilia Ahern. We're not going to pick that. William Boyd, not going to pick that. Isabel Carmody Ober-Newton, that's an audiobook. Don't think I've got time for another audiobook. Anne Patchett, Commonwealth, though. I've had some good times with Anne Patchett in the past. And we got the other. Are they going to fall off? Yes. Oh, no! Total disaster. Oh, dear. Can't even see it. Not sure it's even on this shelf. Let's have a look. Is it on this? Oh, there it is. Didn't even need to pull out the other shelf. Oh dear. Anne Patchett, Commonwealth, number 2. I was going to do one more, but I'm not sure the robot can take it. No, he's fine. He'll be fine. Put all the prompts back in. Thought this was going to be a bit difficult. There's another one. Give him another good old rummage. Get one right from the bottom. Now, we've had green already. I want a different one. Not that the colours actually mean anything, to be fair. Blue, no. Yellow, here we go. Stanley's favourite colour. So what does this say? Lowest rated on physical TBR. Oof, that could be interesting. So, need to select them all again. And this is the rating on Goodreads. 3.03. What is it going to be? Oh, Charlotte Mendelsohn, The Exhibitionist. I was really looking forward to reading that. Maybe it's not very good. But where is it? Is it on here? It must be in here. Has it fallen off? No, don't think so. Is it on the top? Oh, there it is. Right on the front. Didn't fall off. The Exhibitionist, Charlotte Mendelsohn. Okay. Apparently, the Goodreads community, don't know whether we can trust them, don't think it's very good. So I have some tidying up to do, but there we have 3 new books to add to the TBR for May. I may not get to all of them, but we'll see. At least now I've got some more options. Thank you, Stanley. Thank you, robot. So the next book I read was Jeweled Fire by Sharon Shin, which is an audiobook version of book 3 in the Elemental Blessings series by that author, which I am listening to again in preparation for the 5th installment, which I haven't actually read before. And this one follows Princess Corinne, who has been in the previous 2 and was probably my least favourite character in book 1. Rehabilitated herself quite nicely in book 2 and makes for a very good protagonist in book 3. She stows away on a ship to a foreign country, trying to find a husband among the heirs of that country, and ends up getting embroiled in a series of vicious murders. So that was a bit of a surprise. I had forgotten who the romantic interest for her in this book was, and I thought that aspect of it was a bit clunky and possibly a bit problematic, given the age difference between them and the previous history in the series between the characters, but you know, it worked its way out in the end, and I'm very much looking forward to moving on to the next one in the series, because there was a new character introduced in this book who is the protagonist of book 4, and she was my favorite character in this book. It was also interesting to see a different country, because all of the other books have been set in the same place in the world, and also there were lots of representatives from other places in the world, so it broadened out quite nicely. Yeah, so it was good fun. Probably not my favorite in the series, but still a good, solid, entertaining listen. So that was 3.5 stars. So next up was The Royal Correspondent by Alexandra Joel, and this was fulfilling my TBR prompt jar prompt of a book with a person or a job in the title. And this follows Blaze Hill, who takes up a job as a journalist in the late 1950s, early 1960s in Australia, and then travels to the UK to cover a royal wedding. So I had some expectations of what this book was going to be, and then it took some quite interesting and unexpected turns in the thriller direction, with organised crime, violent murders, very abusive relationship in the middle, and yeah, lots of spies. MI5 got involved. Yeah, really took me by surprise, and it took me a little while to kind of come to grips with that. But once I leaned into what the book actually was, rather than what I was expecting it to be, I pretty much really enjoyed it. I really liked all of the stuff about the newspaper production in the 1950s and 1960s. The romance aspect, again, wasn't entirely sure, but it all kind of came together in the end. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. 3.5 stars for this one. Next up was another audiobook in my new attempt to read popular contemporary romances, even though I said in my introductory video for this channel that I wasn't going to do that. I am doing it occasionally. I listened to the 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston because I thought the premise sounded really interesting. It's about a young woman called Clementine who inherits her aunt's apartment in New York when her aunt dies, and then discovers that occasionally it transports her back exactly 7 years in time, and she meets the man who is staying in the apartment at that time 7 years previously, and they end up falling in love, which is not a spoiler because, you know, you see it coming. It is very much a true romance book, because if you take the romance out of it, there is basically no plot left. And I think I've come to the conclusion that I want more from a book than just a romance. I do like romance in books quite a lot. I have read quite a lot of books with romance aspects. I have written books with romance aspects, but I think I need a bit more. I have to admit, this did start to feel as if it was being unnecessarily dragged out by the halfway point, and I hesitate to admit it, but I did listen to most of the second half on a higher speed just to find out what happened. But I did want to find out what happened. So to be fair to the book, I think, you know, this was me, not the book. It's not a bad book. I liked the characters. I liked the aspect about publishing, because Clementine works for a publisher, and I always like stuff about writers and publishers. The romance worked mostly. I struggled a bit when the timelines started overlapping and she was interacting with the guy both in the past and in the present. That felt a little bit weird. And basically the death knell for me for the romance was after the first time they had sex, he leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Good girl," and I nearly threw up in my mouth. So that wasn't great, but it did pull it back. I did start listening to it on normal speed again by the end, because I was enjoying it again, and I did like the ending. I felt like the through line of the grief aspect of the story, because she is dealing with her aunt's death, wasn't that great. It wasn't that strong. It came and went a bit. It didn't really follow through, and it didn't really land for me emotionally. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but I would check the content warnings on this one, because there are some unexpected aspects that could come out of nowhere and possibly cause problems for people with certain triggers. But yeah, it was fine. I mean, I did want to carry on. I didn't want to DNF it, so I'm going to give it 3 stars. So after that, I went for a Penny Vincenzi book, Almost a Crime. This is the 8th Penny Vincenzi book I've read in the last 10 months. I've kind of got a bit obsessed with her, and someone in the town where I live is obviously also going through her back catalogue, because I keep finding these at the Free Station Book Exchange and in one in particular of the charity shops where I get my books. So thank you very much to that resident of my town, because I'm loving these. I really enjoyed 5 out of the 7 previous books that I read. Not so keen on 2 of them. I know what to expect from one of these books now. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of fairly unlikable people doing despicable things to each other. They're all rich, they're all privileged, they're all, up themselves, and really need a slap. But I love it. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Love a good Penny Vincenzi book, and this delivered. It had betrayals, it had infidelity, it had complex layered family relationships, it had melodrama, it had a kidnapping. I mean, everything I wanted out of a book, got it. It does show its 90s heritage in the language used and some of the attitudes expressed about certain now fairly more sensitive subjects, so not great from that point of view. There's quite a lot of misogyny going around, but I do generally like how the female characters are portrayed. They're complex, they're layered, they struggle with certain things, they achieve, they are empowered. Some of them aren't great. It's a good all-rounder. Really enjoyed it. 4 stars. And the next book demonstrates that I don't always like books that are about unlikable characters, and that was The Exhibitionist by Charlotte Mendelson. I'd actually been really looking forward to reading this, but it came into my TBR because I pulled a prompt out of the jar that was the lowest rated book on Goodreads from my physical TBR, and that was this. And I can see why some people like it. I can see why other people don't like it. The author sets her stall out early because the whole first page is a complicated, obscure in-joke about the opening line of Anna Karenina. So I quite enjoyed that, but, I know it might put quite a lot of people off. It's quite pretentious. All of the characters, well, not all of them, but the main character is so incredibly despicable and appalling in the way that he behaves. It's about a family, and the head of the family, Ray Hanrahan, is a tortured artist who has fallen by the wayside in his career, and his wife is now getting more accolades than him, and he can't handle it. And basically everybody else in the book seems to be falling over themselves to try and placate and appease him, and he doesn't deserve it, and it's absolutely horrendous. So I was struggling to read it quite early on. I was quite keen to carry on for a while to find out whether any of the other characters actually managed to escape his influence and whether he got his comeuppance. But by the 50-page mark, which is what I give books before I make a decision about whether I'm going to give up, I couldn't take it. Couldn't take it anymore. So this was sadly a DNF from me. And because I foolishly went out for the day and that was the only book I took with me, and I started it on the train and I DNF'd it on the train, I didn't have anything to read on my way home. So I went onto my Kindle, where I keep comic books largely to read in such circumstances, and I read A Stranger Planet on the way home by Nathan Pyle, which is an adorable little collection of comics. I really enjoyed the first volume. I also really enjoyed the TV show, which was adapted from them. They're about these blue beings who live on a planet, and they demonstrate the weirdnesses of existence through the way they talk and the way they interact. And I had to interrupt Dave's podcast that he was listening to on the train to show him various pages in the book multiple times, because they reminded me of either him or of us together. Really enjoyed it. 4 stars. Then I need to come back to Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano briefly, because we had our family book club meeting in which we discussed it. It was a really good book club book. Everybody had both good and bad things to say about it. Nobody wholly loved it. Nobody wholly hated it. the things we liked and disliked weren't necessarily the same things. Really good discussion, so it was a good book club book, even though I didn't necessarily enjoy it all that much myself. So that worked out for Family Book Club. After that, I went on to P.S. I Love You by Cecilia Ahern, which I think is one of her earlier ones and possibly her most popular, most well-known one. I never know what to expect from a Cecilia Ahern. I've read two. One of them was wholly real world. One of them was almost completely fantastical about somebody transported to an entirely different realm. So didn't know what to expect. This one is wholly real world. It's about a young woman whose husband has died at the age of 30. And then she discovers he's left her envelopes, which she opens once a month to find out little instructions of things that she needs to do to help her move on with her life after his death, which is very sweet. I don't know. It was fine overall. I struggled a bit because it starts from a place of desperate sadness with her being recently bereaved. But because I didn't know any of the characters or any of the background, it didn't feel as if that emotion was earned at the beginning. So it didn't really land with me until quite a way through. But it did have me tearing up several times throughout the book. I wasn't wholly sold on the premise because it felt like she was actually almost being held back from moving on because she was living basically just to open the envelopes. And there is no way, if I was this person, I must commend her for her self-restraint, because if this had happened to me, which I very much hope it never does, and I had these envelopes, there's no way I would wait a whole month each time. I would have opened all of the envelopes in the first 5 minutes. So props to her for actually waiting each time. But yeah, I don't know. And it looked as though it was going somewhere really predictable, and then it didn't. So that was quite nice. But yeah, very inconsistent in tone. A lot of the characters, other than the main character, came across almost as caricatures. They were quite over the top, which jarred a bit against the emotional journey that Holly was going on. And yeah, it just didn't really hold together. I mean, you could say that it was quite an accurate representation of grief in terms of her sometimes having good days, sometimes having bad days, it being unpredictable and inconsistent. But that wasn't the way it came across. She would like go out for a night with her friends and have a really good time, and then a few days later the book would say that she hadn't actually managed to be happy in the whole of 6 months. And it wasn't just that she was feeling as though she hadn't been happy in the whole of the 6 months, which is something that happens, that when you're having a tough time, you forget, you can't remember that you ever felt differently. That wasn't how it came across. It was the book saying it when it had actually been demonstrated completely the opposite. So I don't know, went up and down a bit for me. I think overall it wasn't a bad book. It wasn't difficult to read. I didn't ever want to give up on it, but didn't wholly work. So 3 stars from me for that one. And then I read Commonwealth by Anne Patchett, which came up from the TBR jar with the prompt of the shortest title, because it's only one word. That was the one I picked. I have really enjoyed the other 3 Anne Patchett books that I have previously read, so I had relatively high hopes for this one, but it didn't really work out for me, this one. She has a tendency to fracture her narratives and then kind of put them together like a giant jigsaw puzzle, jumping back and forth in time. And I often really enjoy that. But in this one, I think it was so fractured. And in particular, there were things that were revealed really gradually in a really contrived way, the way they were obscured, that I don't know, it didn't quite work. And even when all of the jigsaw pieces came together, the whole picture still felt a bit blurry. It's about 2 families who are intertwined by infidelity and remarriage. So the marriage is split up and one of the husbands and one of the wives then get together. And the various children from the 2 previous marriages are thrown together at various times and form different relationships amongst themselves, and it's to do with various things that happen across their childhoods. I quite liked Franny as probably the main protagonist. She was probably the point of view character the most. I enjoyed, there was a pleasingly meta aspect because there is a book within the book that has the same title as the book and is about the characters in the book. So I quite enjoyed that. It was a bit convoluted, but that was good. And the impact of that on how they feel about each other and what they find out or don't find out about various things that have happened in their past. So aspects of it were good. Other aspects of it, not so good. I did finish it. I did think about DNFing it a few times, but then it would jump to a different place and time and a different character, and I'd get involved again. So overall, it did come together, but definitely not my favourite Anne Patchett. 3 stars. And because I am reading a frankly ridiculous amount again this month, I ran out of books on my TBR. So still had 4 days of the month to go. So I decided that I would mood read rather than pulling another prompt. I would just pick a book off the TBR shelves and read whatever I wanted. And as sometimes happens, I looked through the whole selection of books available to me and I didn't want to read any of them. So I decided to give myself the present of allowing myself to go on a trip to the charity shops to buy 1 book to read in the rest of the month. And you can probably guess where this is going, but let's see what happened. So yes, to nobody's surprise, I went out for 1 book and bought 6. And I actually went out again yesterday to try and get the Goldfinch as well, because I decided why not? But I misremembered which charity shop it was in, and then the correct charity shop was shut. So I'm going to try again tomorrow, because yeah, I want that one too. Anyway, the book that I selected from the 6 that I bought that I read was The Last Song of Winter by Lulu Taylor, which appealed to me because I've read 2 of hers previously and pretty much enjoyed them. This one is a split narrative between Veronica in the 1940s and Romy in the present day, which is kind of now because this was published in 2024. Veronica's story is about Parisian high society, the lead up to the war in Europe, what else? Musical theatre, queer rights, yeah, kind of 1940s upper middle class story, which I quite enjoyed. Romy's story is set on an island off the coast of Wales, which was owned by Veronica's family. And Veronica spent a lot of time there, and Romy is going on retreat there to try and write a book. There's a bit of meta, a bit like the Commonwealth by Anne Patchett, because there's Romy's book has the same title as the actual book and is also about a film of the same title, which is also about the island in the book. So that was a bit convoluted, but I quite enjoy that kind of thing. By about halfway through, I was enjoying it. I was engaged. I was happy reading it, but I didn't really see where it was going because there wasn't really a central through line that connected the 2 narratives particularly strongly. And yes, much like the other Lulu Taylor books that I have read, it ramped up massively towards the end, and the huge melodrama in both narrative storylines had very little to do with what had actually been happening before. There were some quite ridiculous coincidences, but it was a fun ride and I enjoyed it. I liked where it ended up, kept me reading throughout. Good choice for the last physical book of the month, or so I thought. 3.5 stars from me. I also finished another audiobook, Unquiet Land by Sharon Shin, which is the 4th in the Elemental Blessings series that I've been doing a reread of. This one follows Leah, who has been abroad for 5 years and is now coming back to the central country of Wales in this world to rediscover her roots and try and build a relationship with her 5-year-old daughter, who she pretty much abandoned basically when she was born for various reasons. There's a romance, as there always is in these books, and I wasn't massively on board with this one because the romantic interest character had been introduced in the previous book, and I don't know whether I'm misremembering. I mean, I only read it last month, or actually earlier this month, and I felt like that relationship was more of a sort of a father-daughter relationship than a potential romantic interest. So it took me a little while to get on board with it, but it got me in the end, I have to say. And all of the development of Leah's relationship with her daughter was, yeah, very, very emotive and definitely made me cry. Yeah, there was a lot of political intrigue, which was a little bit over the top in this one, I'm not going to lie. There was another country that was introduced, and all of the people had very extreme views, the people who came from there. And in terms of, you know, realistic world building, a society based on those attitudes and moral compass would not work. It was not going to work. So that was a bit weird, but there was a lot of excitement. Yeah, I enjoyed it, definitely. Looking forward to moving on to the last in the series, which I have never read, so quite excited about that for probably next month. 3.5 stars. And then a few days before the end of the month, an author contacted me and asked me to read and review his book on my channel, and I thought, why not? Might be a fun thing to do. So I also managed to squeeze in The Lich Before the Darkness by Timothy Stormcrow, which is set in a world very like our own, but where supernatural creatures like vampires and werewolves and revenants roam about and are fairly common and part of society and live in the open. And it's about how that affects society. The main protagonist, Ashlyn, is recruited to join a government department that investigates problems with the supernatural and helps either people who are supernatural creatures or who are trying to deal with supernatural creatures to solve their problems. It was fun. I enjoyed it. It had some surface issues with punctuation, which could be very easily fixed and did detract a little bit from the reading experience, but otherwise the writing was good. I liked the characters. It was a fun story, though I have to admit the main plot line didn't really turn up until over halfway through. And there were 3 narrative threads following 3 different characters, and they didn't really converge until quite late in the book. And then that didn't really go anywhere much. I think it may be being set up for volumes later in the series, but it all just fractured again and everybody went their separate ways and it wasn't connected anymore. And a lot of it was quite episodic. We were following Ashlyn's training and her first few missions, and it was just, I don't know, it just wasn't particularly cohesive as a plot, but it kept me reading throughout. I would be interested to read more in the series, not least because it finished very abruptly, almost mid-scene, on quite a cliffhanger, and was obviously setting things up for later in the series. But yeah, it was fun. 3 stars. So this is the frankly ridiculous stack of books that I have read in May. I can't have both me and Stanley and all the books in frame, which is very silly. But there we go. Those are all my books that I finished in May. It was a pretty good reading month. Enjoyed it. I hope you have enjoyed my reviews of the books. I am hoping to slow down a little bit in June, but we'll see how that goes. And I also have a plan for splitting up my reading a bit across different videos. So I am developing a new series which will be coming sometime in June. So looking forward to getting started with that. And that's it for this video. And my goal for this month's wrap up was to make a video that was shorter than last month's wrap up, So we will have to see whether I succeeded. I think it's going to be close, but yeah, I did my best. Anyway, all of the details of my other creative projects, the podcast, my books, Stanley's online content, which is amazing because he is amazing, are in the description. Please give a like and subscribe if that feels appropriate to you. And yeah, I hope you're having a good month. Bye for now.